Okay, last interview, but not necessarily the least, is Ron Randall. And Ron comes from a background of his father, who was David Randall of the Lilly Library,
Yes.
and a great librarian for years and years and years. And there was a book written about him, and show that copy of that book.
Actually, it's his autobiography.
Excuse me, his autobiography.
Duke de Enough.
Can you get that on the Recollections of a Rare Bookseller for 38 years? I suppose you can get copies of that book from you. Now,
It went into 3 printings, and it was voted by one of the big Chicago papers, one of the 10 best books of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
I've read it more than once and enjoy it. But let's start at the beginning. Take us through your youth, siblings, what your parents were like, what schools you went to, where you went to college, and what eventually turned you into a bookseller.
Good questions, long ones. The first inkling I had of books was when I think I learned to read. I was somewhat, I suppose, precocious there. I think I could read when I was 3.
Wow.
A little bit before my brother was 18 months older. I was brought up with books and was just a born reader, I suppose. I went to Mamaroneck High School. My claim to fame there is I was the second string end on their first undefeated football team.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. I then, after that, Korean War came along, and I joined the Navy. And I went to radar school, and I was on a destroyer escort radar for over a year. We would steam around in 30-mile circles off the beaches of the Atlantic coast looking for incoming Russian planes. Korean War ended. I applied for an early discharge and got out about 3 months early. And so one week I was on a DER, and the next week I was a freshman in college, University of Vermont.
Oh.
I went there, basically, my interest had been the University of Missouri School of Journalism, but I hadn't gotten in on time to take the GEDs or whatever it was required because our ship was fog-bound, and Vermont didn't require, and one of the officers on the ship had just graduated from Vermont.
Good school.
So it just kind of tied together.
How'd you like the winters?
Long.
Long.
Get old very quickly.
Yeah, really.
But I snowshoed and skied a little bit.
When did you make the decision that book business was something you wanted to prosecute?
When I was a boy, people would ask what your father did, and their boys would ask, and you'd say, well, he's a banker, or he's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's an Indian chief. An antiquarian bookseller, what's that?
Yeah, I get that all the time.
That would change the conversation right then. I had moved to California. I was living in Marin County, and I started collecting books, I suppose. I collected a man named Thomas Edward Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. And in the end, I had a first-rate, second-rate collection. I didn't have the wherewithal to buy the big ones.
Yeah.
But I thought he was a fascinating character in history. And multi-talented. I started stumbling around in bookstores, and I got into Warren Howell's John Howell Books, 434 Post Street. And I guess at some point introduced myself, and after that I was paid attention to because my dad. I was selling real estate in Marin County. I was running a real estate office, and I was making a living, but I was becoming an insomniac. Yeah. And I finally approached Howell for a job, and we did it on a one-day-a-week basis for about 2 months, and then he decided I would be good enough to come in full-time. So I gave up the real estate hat and put on the bookseller's hat, and I worked for Howell for 7 years, which wasn't, as many people can tell you, an easy thing to do, from 1968 to 75.
What precipitated your decision to go out on your own?
I don't really remember. I think it seemed to be the lesser of two problems. I 7 years at Howell was really a great adventure. And I don't mean to put him down in that way. Of all the bookmen I've ever known, I think he was probably the most dedicated.
Yeah.
He would be at his desk at 7 in the morning
Absolutely.
and would stay there until his wife would call and scold him to come home after 6 at night.
Yeah. How long? So you worked there for 7 years.
68 to 75.
Right. I remember when you left, he was very upset. He said, "I don't know what's going on with him. He's got a shop that sounds like a Chinese restaurant. House of Randall." No, I said it's Randall House, not House of Randall.
No, it's Randall and Wendell. I went into partnership with another ex-employee, John Wendell.
Right.
And we opened up down the street.
That was before you became Randall House.
Yeah. Yeah.
John
and I worked
Street.
for about 4 years together, and when we split up, I had to think of a new name. And I thought of Random House, Randall House, House of the LDF, all these other house things. I once, here's a little joke, a very good bookseller now named Bill Wire worked for me for some months. And I told him we could never become partners because Randall House and Wire would sound like a hardware store.
It would. Well, what caused the breakup between you and John?
I think just different directions at different times. I suppose I'm probably about 10 years older than John, and we had worked together at Howell. And as we worked together, it worked well. But it was his idea, and we're still friends. I think at a recent book fair here, he and I were walking down an aisle together, laughing and carrying on. He said to me, "I bet a lot of people don't understand this."
No, I would think not. Usually breakups are not usually on a friendly basis.
No, this was at least semi-friendly, and I don't think either of us ever held a grudge about it.
Talk a little bit about your experience as a bookseller with a computer.
I could have to call in my associate, P. Oliver, because if I didn't have her working for me, she's a computer whiz, a Mac user, mind you.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have a business in this day and age.
So you don't use the computer?
Yes, I do. It's a two-edged sword. I have bought more books on the computer from more places than 7 maids or 7 booksellers with 7 mops and 7 lifetimes could find.
Right.
On the other hand, if you're selling books, you better have the best book at a comparable price, or you're going to be sitting on it until you do.
Best, cheapest, only.
It's made rare books scarce, scarce books common, common books almost unsaleable.
In a previous interview, I classified it as a race to the bottom.
That's good. That's a good line, yes.
Essentially what it is.
And I just took on a large library from a retired bookseller that has a lot of the bottom fish in it. And on consignment.
What are you going to do?
Pray.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You're going to just have to have the cheapest copy.
It's a lot of Western Americana, which is one of my strengths, and we'll see.
Talk a little bit about your move from the Bay Area to where you are now.
Well, I had a lovely store at the corner of 185 Post by the
second floor,
Chinatown, just 2 or 3 blocks down from John Howell Books. And I signed a lease, but when I signed it, there was a proviso that within X amount of time they could double the rent. And X amount of time went by, and they wanted to double the rent, and I saw the writing on the wall. In the meantime, I'd become friends with Maury and Marcia Neville, who had their bookstore in Santa Barbara. And I was talking to them about what I was going to do, and they invited me to come down and share the building with them. It's a national landmark. It's an adobe building built in the 1820s. And they have floor-to-ceiling bookcases everywhere. And so I took over one wing of it until the early 90s when they decided that they didn't want to be in the antiquarian book business anymore. And so I had the option of wondering who would take over the other half, or what would, or take it over myself. So I took it over. I've been there 25 years on a handshake.
Really? Who owns the building?
Maury and Marcia Neville.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not like they're strangers.
No, not at all. Since 1984, they've owned it.
Wow. Besides Western Americana, I know there are other things that you deal in.
Well, I if I can toot my own horn for a second, I think one of my strengths is imagination. At John Howell Books, I created a catalog of literature, 150 years of literature, a different book for every year, first editions. And that was kind of novel for John Howell Books.
Yeah, I should say so.
But when I went on my own, I started thinking of various things to do, and I got the idea of putting together a collection of novels, books that I ended up cataloging as famous films in first edition, and writing the descriptions as much from the point of view of the film, the actor, the screenwriter, the transition, as from the point of view of the book. And it did very, very well. I had 2 customers that must have bought 80 or 90% of the catalog.
Really? Well, that's great. Now, how many catalogs do you issue?
I think we've issued 32 or 33, and
I'm talking more annually than cumulatively.
Not annually.
Every now and then? Or?
Yeah, every now and then. The most recent was a catalog of books on the title entirely on the American Revolution. But I've done others, catalogs entirely on Robert Louis Stevenson first editions.
I think the one great catalog that I remember you did was the one on women. And you have a copy of it here.
What Katie did, that was fishing around for a new idea. And most of the...
Hold it up so we can take a look at it.
Most of the books on women I thought were kind of stuffy, if you will, and I wanted to do something with a little popular history. Now that is Elizabeth Eichhardt. On the back is my secretary from San Francisco, Claudia Roper. She was a marathon runner. She'll be here today to say hello.
Really? God, I haven't seen her in 100 years.
They moved to Maine.
Well, that was a good thing to do.
No, they're back here for a month. I'm happy about it.
They are too. Maine got killed with snow too.
But I personalized it. It's somewhere.
That looks like an expensive thing to do, too.
Yeah, very. There's my late wife, ex-wife, and my 2 daughters. The
I was very fond
larger
of
one has twin 3-year-old son. She's got her hands full. The younger one is a colonel in the Army just being deployed with her battalion to Iraq.
Well, at least it's not Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's the way I'm looking at it, too.
Yeah, excellent. What else
but
did
it
you
did very well. I sold more books to institutions from this catalog than any catalog I've ever done.
Which brings me to the question, what percentage of your business is private, dealer, institution?
I would say it's probably 65% private, and the rest probably 50-50 between institutions. And
do you do a lot of quotations?
Yes, we do.
Pia does a lot of quotations.
Yeah, and we keep a lot of notes and people's wants and things like that. But this most recent one is a catalog of books, the Carolyn Pellicero collection, Western Americana. Her father was the first mayor of Beverly Hills. She's in her mid-90s.
When did you issue that catalog?
About a year or 2 ago.
Yeah, I know it's not recent.
Yeah. But in the catalog we did entirely on N.C. Wyeth first editions. I happily own a couple of Wyeth paintings, and my mother had been an art student under Howard Pyle, so it kind of followed. Myself, I can't make a stick figure. Life can be a jip.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I can't do it either.
And my brother was Mr. Universe, so he took that part of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know he was a weightlifter.
Yeah, he passed away a few months ago.
Oh, that's too bad. No, I was extremely fond of your former wife, who was really she was a dynamite woman.
Yeah.
We were all saddened when she passed away.
Cancer at 44.
I know, it's just awful. We talked a little bit about computers. Tell me a little bit about some of the booksellers who had an influence on you, who you looked up to, or who mentored you, who you felt had it right, as you were when you were working at Howell's, for example.
Well, I learned a lot from Warren Howell.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And somebody who was a lot happier to be with, if you will, was David McGee.
Yeah.
A wonderful bookseller, great sense of humor, and
we miss both of them for different reasons.
Yeah.
Anybody else you can think of that was like a mentor or you looked up to as a bookseller?
Not that I can think of offhand. I'm not being selfish about it, but Howell and McGee. There were a number of other booksellers around, Reed and Lester Roberts and Fields and
for our audience out there is going to wonder who some of these people are.
Yeah.
I mean, we know who they are, but who knows if they do.
Yeah.
But these are all great booksellers who paved the way for the rest of us to be where we are.
The passing parade.
It's just incredible. Let me talk to you a little bit about who you see as some of the rising stars in the trade. Some young people who you think are going to be okay.
I frankly don't know many of the young ones. We don't get that much visitation. Not so young anymore. I've always been impressed by what Bill Reese has done with himself.
Well, yeah. Well, we've all sort of agreed that if he's not the greatest bookseller in America, he's the second greatest. You can figure out who's better, but he's got all the attributes to be successful.
It was like, was it Krauss? They used to say he's number one. He's so far ahead. There's no number two.
That's pretty much. Yeah. That's pretty much the situation.
And Harrington over in England.
Tom or Adrian?
Well, I like them both, but they do very well.
They're very ambitious to what they do.
Yeah.
I'm not a bindings set kind of guy, so I don't understand the mentality of that kind of thing. But I suppose there's a lot of money to be made in it.
I suppose there is. We're doing more appraisal these days than we used to. And I've had a couple of. It's a great learning experience. If not a particularly profitable way to close your bookstore to look at somebody else's books, but I recently had to appraise, and I won't tell you what figure I came up with, the copy of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos, one of 8 copies with the misprint in the front. The misprint is spelled correctly. It should have been spelled incorrectly. Described by Anita Loos very warmly to an actress named Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
Now, what price do you put on that?
That's a hell of a copy of that. I could come up with a price.
I started here and I went up, but I went up.
Yeah, because when you're talking about unique things, it doesn't make a difference what price you put on it, does it?
No.
Somebody else is going to look at it and think there's money to be made.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps that business going.
Yeah. I wouldn't generally suggest our competition auction, but I'd love to see it auction. How determined 2 people would be about that.
Or 3 or 4. Yeah. There's still a large cult of Marilyn Monroe enthusiasts. Yeah. Anita Loos, not so much, but the Marilyn Monroe part, that's pretty special. Okay, well, we're winding down. Let me just ask you, look into your crystal ball for a moment and think about what are the great challenges that we face in the coming decade as booksellers, as antiquarian booksellers.
Indoctrinating and bringing along and nurturing new book collectors, young people. I would highly recommend that every book fair, international or local, allow in for free anyone under a certain age, maybe 18 or 21, or anybody that could produce a college ID or a similar thing, and let them get sparked with
I think it's a wonderful idea, and what we have done in Boston is that we give away somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 free tickets to young people, to colleges, to public libraries, and we have a thing called the book fair that takes place on the steps of the Boston Public Library. There's 100 exhibitors, and each one of them are giving out tickets to the people who come by. It's amazing how many people have come to the book fair.
That's great. That's great.
From a marketing
how long has that been going on?
This is our first year doing this.
Oh.
The promoter has a booth and does it. Therefore, we can pass around our propaganda to everybody else.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%. there's something inherently wrong when we're not trying to cultivate the future, when we're satisfied with the present.
Yeah.
So I just don't know where it's all going to go.
I just hope there isn't too much of a lull between it happening. I do believe it will.
Well, the economy is an issue.
Yeah.
And that's really a big problem. But before I let you go, tell me something about Pia. Okay, tell her name, what she does for you, and how you view her.
She has one of these really lengthy Swedish names, Britt Marie Pia Oliver. I probably left out 3 names. She and I worked together at John Howell Books on 2 occasions. She worked there for a year or so, and then she worked there again for a while. She's head of the art department. And we became friends, and we went our own ways, and I reconnected with her years later. She was running an art gallery and a frame shop in Temecula, California. And we became reacquainted and friends. She is really good. First of all, being Swedish, she had a better education than I did being an American. She knows French and some German and Swedish and probably some Spanish and a few other things.
I hate people like that.
Great help. If I went back to school and knew I was going to become a bookseller, I would take 2 or 3 languages.
Yeah, I did. It didn't do me any good.
Yeah, I took Latin.
I did too.
Latin is a dead language, dead as it can be. First it killed the Romans, and now it's killing me.
And French, I really enjoyed taking French until I started to speak it in France, and people would correct every word I said, which turned me off from speaking French.
But Pia decided, she became acquainted with Santa Barbara and decided that she might be happier buying a house there and moving up from Temecula. And she did, and we've just been working now. Whatever I would say, it hasn't been long enough. Could it be close to 10 years? Probably so. But she is a great help. The bookstore opens at 10. She's there at 8:50. She is really just the most valuable person I've ever had. This lady back of this catalog, Claudia Ropers, when I left San Francisco, I gave her as much of a bonus as I could afford, and I went and got a trophy that said, Claudia Ropers, Randall House, San Francisco, most valuable employee, 1975-1985.
That's great. That's great. Does Pia have a family?
Yes, she has 2 sons, a daughter, and has just had her first grandchild, of which she is exceedingly proud.
Well, the first grandchild, there's no explaining how you feel, having been through it. But the thing I was curious about Pia is, do any of her children have an interest in the book business?
Not really, no.
They've gone their separate way.
Yeah. It's. I think it must be unusual. I've been told it's unusual to have a child follow the parent into the antiquarian book business. It happens.
Well, if you look at all the book businesses there are in this country, there are very few that are, have gone from generation to generation.
Yeah.
You can think of Dawson's as one. Who else? I mean, it's not like in England where it's expected.
Yeah. Rulon Miller, and there are a number.
Well, yeah, it's Rulon's father, yeah. Well, Ron, thank you very much for sharing some time with me. Enjoyed it tremendously.